This episode is brought to you by Audi. The road is calling. Embrace the thrill of the drive with the all-new, fully electric Audi Q6 e-tron. Featuring effortless power, serious acceleration, and advanced Audi tech. It's not just a new EV, it's a new way to experience driving. The all-new, fully electric Audi Q6 e-tron is here. The next chapter of Audi starts now.
Over the past several days, 3 females have been found dead.
Looks like someone's going after these girls.
Then they have to know to watch their backs.
Streaming March 13th.
You really want what happened to this woman that happened to you?
Exactly why I need to keep going on this.
Starring Emmy Award winner Amanda Seyfried.
I'm worried about what you're gonna find. So am I.
Long Bright River. A limited series. Streaming March 13th. Only on Peacock.
Good morning, guys, and welcome to the podcast from Denver, Colorado. I've got Valerie Morris, and she's a brand positioning strategist and book marketing expert. And so for the audience out there that is interested in up-leveling their content, thought leadership, influencer by writing a book, marketing your content, Valerie's the one to help us in today's topic. And so I'm really happy to welcome her to the show. So Valerie, welcome.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I always love talking about books and talking about just how we can all level up our personal brand. So this will be fun.
Yeah. And so briefly, just get the conversation started. Talk about how you got started and what you do and what your clients come to you for.
Yeah, I've had a digital marketing agency for about 15 years. And about halfway into that, I discovered if I really want to get out there and do more public speaking and being taken seriously as a consultant, a book was going to be a really helpful tool for me. You can get by without a book, but I would say most people in the consulting speaker space, a book is an incredibly powerful tool. And so I sought out to write my own book. I also was finding I was reading all these books by other people, and I was like, I've got original thoughts. Why don't I put them in a book as well? I just kept thinking like, why am I reading these other people's books? This is telling me stuff I already know. So I started putting together a lot of the thoughts and the messages that I was telling my clients day in and day out into my own book. And as a marketer, I focused, as I started thinking through the publishing process, I reverse engineered the publishing process, because I wanted to know it for myself, but also it feels like a very confusing process. It's this traditional industry that we're all retrofitting into with the self-publishing space. And with digital marketing, a lot of the old traditional things are still in place. There's things like ISBN numbers and logistics you have to figure out as a published author. But there's also this thing called social media and email marketing that wasn't around hundreds of years ago when the book industry really took its first steps. So it's this hybrid situation. And what I found is that a lot of people, they focus so much on just getting the book into print. They're focused on the manuscript and the book cover and getting all the logistics, figuring out how to price it, how to upload the files the right way, get everything set. And then it's, wait, I got to market this thing. Like, I've got to promote this thing. I've got to build hype. So a lot of people focus just on building the product and not necessarily promoting the product. And so that's where I really was able to reverse engineer the process to see there's so many different marketing tactics that we can incorporate into this process of launching a book and being strategic about how we're using a book as a tool for our brand versus just creating a book to create a book. It's no, let's let this book actually work for us in our brand and help us move the needle for some bigger marketing or bigger business goals that we have. So ever since my book came out, I have had so many people just come to me asking, hey, will you help me with this? Will you help do what you did for my book or for my client's book? And since then, it's snowballed into something where just yesterday I was working with 3 different authors on some strategy for their book. So it's one of those things that's now become a more dominant project focus within our agency work.
Interesting. Yeah, I was listening to this one podcast and he was talking about how he wrote a book and then but he realized he did it all backwards. When someone's interested in launching a book, talk about the 3 mistakes to avoid when launching.
I think one of the biggest mistakes people make is when and I already touched on this, they focus just on getting the book made. And you almost end up putting as much effort into promoting the book as you do to publishing the book. So a lot of people just don't put intentional thought. Like I know people who they got notice from their publisher or whoever was helping them with their publishing tactics and told them on a Friday morning, your book is live, it's been approved, it's up there on Amazon. And instead of putting some actual strategy around promoting their book, they just put one social media post out and on a Friday afternoon, and that was it. And I was like, first of all, half the world is checked out for the weekend at this point. If you're going to just slap out one social media post, at least do it on a day when people are paying attention to social media and they're not out already at happy hour. But a lot of people, they just get so excited to talk about their book that they forget to put the intentionality to build up the excitement for it in a strategic way.
Yeah.
So that's probably the first big mistake. One of the other big things that I see people do is they will build the logistics of their book, but they don't ask around enough to get a couple opinions on things. So for example, one of the books that we're working on this week, our team was actually formatting their book, and we're formatting. We're not really going through with an editing eye, but if we see stuff, we'll make the changes. And we came across more grammatical and spelling mistakes than should ever be possible, considering how much spell check works in today's world and how much kind of the grammatical checks kind of auto-populate in so many programs. So I think one of those things is just to ask around for a couple different opinions. A lot of people make the assumption that hiring a publisher is going to solve all their problems. And a lot of publishers, they just put the word publisher next to their name and they don't really know the process. So asking around and getting a few different quotes for things and get a feel for how are those people talking about the process? Can you tell from talking to them that they actually know their stuff instead of just hiring somebody because they've got the right words next to them? And then one of the other big mistakes people make is they grossly overestimate like how fast they can work. And so a lot of people don't allow enough time between their book being done and their launch date. So I've worked with too many authors where launch date is coming up maybe in the next week and their book is still not fully submitted and approved to the major online platforms for their book. And I think part of this, you were working with different graphic designers, different formatters, different publishing teams. And a lot of times we're brought in just to help with the launch management. And so for us, we're just playing quarterback to things, but we also don't have control over how fast somebody else is working and can complete a project. And you also have a little bit of control, not much, over how fast things can get approved. So I've seen some things get approved in a matter of hours when you submit a new book. And I've also seen somewhere it literally sits there for weeks and you have to contact support and you have to fight with them to get something approved simply because something got flagged by a bot. And so my best advice to somebody is to think about which day you want to launch, work backwards from that, and you can set the appropriate timelines. I think the timing is one of the things that I work with clients the most on. But if you can add extra buffer in there, if you're not needing to launch on a certain day, if you're flexible, add some extra time. You're probably going to need it. And it's just one of those things that there's always something that comes up in a book launch. There's always some sort of little snag that happens, whether you could prevent it or not. And the more prepared you can be, the better.
Interesting. And we'll go into the next phase is pre-launch and launch strategies. And so you mentioned time and how much time, because I know it's almost like launching a course or launching program or another like a pro community. So what should people do before launching their book? Like when should they start to create buzz and when should they do all of that, and how much time should they allow?
Yeah, the biggest piece of advice I've got for somebody is you don't have to talk about your book if 100% that your book is going to be completed, then you can start talking about it. Now, if you know your personality well and you know that the moment you start writing your manuscript, you're committed to this and it's going to happen, start talking about it then. Start dropping seeds. The marketing can start even while you're writing the book. I personally like to wait until I'm closer to, my manuscript is about 75, 80% done. I'm going to get this over the finish line because I've put too much into it now. But if it's just an early stage idea, sometimes I keep those closer to myself before telling the public. But anytime you can build buzz around just the concepts that you're writing about, it just teases out the fact that you're going to have a book coming. The pre-launch piece, there's definitely some like milestones along the way that you need to make in terms of like, how much time do you need to make sure that the editing is done and the formatting and like all of the little steps. But the biggest piece is like that. It's usually a 3 to 6 month time frame that it takes to get a book ready to go. Once your draft is done and you move it on to editing. Once you're in that editing phase, it just depends on how fast your team can work on some of those things. And so what I like to do with people is I like to say, what's your goal for launching? Let's say your goal is September 1st or December 1st. And then you work backwards from there, setting the different milestones. And then you see, okay, it's February still when we're recording this. To launch in September feels realistic because I know all of the little deadlines along the way, and I've included buffer in there. Now, some people I've worked with, they wanted to launch on a very specific day because there was either some sort of significance to the story or the content of the book, or one was a mental health book about suicide prevention. That one we were really strategic to launch on one of those minor holidays related to mental health. And sometimes there's different deadlines that are dictating all of those other deadlines. So that's the biggest piece of advice I can give to people is it usually takes at least a few months because as you and I both know, a week goes by really fast and you blink and all of a sudden it's Friday again. And so for some of those things where it's editing might take 3 weeks, let's add an extra week, maybe 2, just to make sure. Because the best scenario that you can have is where your book is ready to go. Your marketing is all ready to deploy and launch. And you just are waiting for some final, like you could be all ready and you're just waiting to deploy those things. That's the best case scenario. Usually there's 1 or 2 things that happen to be last minute that you're scrambling to fix. So again, that buffer is really important. And then when you're picking your actual launch date, I typically like to avoid Friday afternoons, like for the reasons I mentioned before, just people are starting to check out for the weekend. Don't launch on a Saturday. People are off at soccer games and on weekend trips. They're out skiing. They're out doing all the things. They're not paying attention to their inbox or their DMs or all of those to where they're actually going to take action. So I would just get in the psyche of the people that you're trying to take action and make sure that you're launching on a time frame that's appropriate. If holiday break is happening or Thanksgiving week, like those are not great weeks to launch books because people aren't focused on their inbox. They're not focused on their DMs all the time. A lot of people check out during those times. So just be smart about when you're thinking of launching and are there any big things that could distract during that time frame?
Yeah, these are really great pieces of advice. Another question, this comes from the viewers, is so for example, there's one camp, because I know of a couple of successful authors, they sold a lot of their books through like speaking or they give them to clients or a lot of them were on their store website using search engines and they never did any of this launch or pre-launch or anything. And then is it better to have a successful launch and just make all your sales at once versus just play the long game and just have residual income and steady income as opposed to just all the sales all in the beginning?
Yeah, I think with both phases of things, like they're different approaches, but both phases need a strategy to them. And when you mentioned like the speakers, that's a great tool. Your book can be an amazing complementary tool to trainings you do or speaking opportunities taking things, whether you're giving your book away or a lot of people with speaking, they have it in their contract that the event organizer is buying a copy for every one of their attendees. And so there's a lot of ways you can leverage your book in the ongoing piece, and that you need to have a marketing strategy for that. But keep in mind, that's going to be a slower burn than your launch. The nice thing about the launch phase is that everyone is focused on you and your book. And so in a world where it's hard to get people's attention, my personal preference is to really focus on the launch. You're going to get the most blitz of your sales is going to happen then around your launch. And that's also when you're going to have the most attention around you as the face of the book. And so I'm talking with clients when we're talking about strategy, I'm asking them questions like, who are some people that may not buy the book ever, but you just want them to know you have the book? Maybe you're trying to get in with certain clients, or you're wanting to re-engage past clients. Maybe you're trying to get speaking gigs at certain associations and certain platforms. And you want to say, hey, I just want that event organizer to know that my book is live. You're using the book as a tool to help position yourself as that trusted authority in your space. You almost don't care if they ever read the book. Obviously, you want people to read your book, but when you're using it as a tool to network and a tool to position your authority and expertise, you almost don't care if people read the book, because they're automatically going to just have that micro impression of your name, your face, and the subject of your book. And now, if it's clear in your title, it's going to be blatantly obvious to people that you're an expert in XYZ. They don't even have to read the book to know that. The fact that you've written 30,000 plus words about it is proof to them that you know your stuff. I like to think through very strategically, yes, I want sales, but also are there other things that I can do during the launch phase that are going to help me use this book to further my professional career?
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, and then it's like a book it's actually a tool. And in an age where everybody is on social media and is on video, how do books play a role in this? Is it diminishing? Is more attention more on video? Because I know a lot of people, they're like, oh, a course is better than a book, or a podcast or a YouTube channel with thousands and thousands of followers is better than a book. What are your thoughts?
I think the way that I've focused and thought about books in terms of content marketing, which is what you're talking about, are all the different channels you can get it out on. A book is a great starting place. And actually, a book is a place where you can pull ideas for videos and to tease out your book. It's a place where you can pull out sound bites for social media posts. It's a place where you could extrapolate other blog post ideas that are always tying people back over to the book. So the reality is, if you've got something that's 30,000, most business related books are at least 30,000 words. If you've written at least 30,000 words on a subject, you should be able to extract a lot of different ideas, sound bites, concepts to create videos for YouTube, to create content for Instagram, to create content for your email marketing. And you can leverage it in so many different ways. I know many authors who then they have the book to start, but then they create a workbook. And then they have a course that then talks about the same concepts. And they will do live trainings with the course, or they have an e-course where people can get a free book when they sign up for the course, and it walks them through it in a different manner. And I think the reality is people learn differently. You have some people, they have to write things down to really solidify it. Some people need to see it. Some people need to hear it. And so it's the same thing. Like your book might be the core content, but then you can extrapolate it into audio formats, small, short clips for social. There's so many different ways you can explore and just take that book as the home base and then expand from there. So I don't know I think it's more of a question of not like which thing to do, but yes, all. Like the book can be incorporated into all of them. And honestly, like when you approach your marketing from that perspective, one, you'll write a more strategic book from the start. If you have that as your frame of reference, you will write a better book from the start, because you will then plan to use that book as a tool to help inform all of your other marketing materials. And I've heard other people talk about how like a book, you could create thousands of pieces of content from just one book. And I believe it. It helps you take the writer's block out of what do I talk about on social media? What do I talk about in my brand strategy with my marketing? If you got a book, start there.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. From your morning podcast to your afternoon playlist, State Farm knows you personalize your entire day. And that's why State Farm helps you personalize your insurance with the State Farm Personal Price Plan. It offers coverage options that help protect what you care about most at an affordable price just for you. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Prices vary by state. Options selected by customer. Availability and eligibility may vary.
Employee Appreciation Day is March 7th, and a Starbucks card is the perfect way to say, thanks for all you do. Have a smaller team? You can send up to 10 e-gifts in one transaction from the Starbucks app or online at starbucks.com/gift. Or you can also send physical or digital cards in bulk at starbuckscardb2b.com. No matter your team's size or location, Starbucks has got you covered.
Yeah, and I know we're coming to closer to the end of the conversation. And another question from the audience is, in this day and age where we've got social media and we can probably generate more hype and buzz, are more people going the self-publishing route as opposed to the traditional publishing route? And is the traditional publishing route more geared towards like celebrities or high profile? Whereas if you're a mom and pop or indie, self-publishing is the way to go.
Yeah, there's a lot of different factors there. Honestly, that's one of the questions that kept me up at night for probably months when I was thinking about writing my book. Was it worth trying to go after a deal? That's a lot of work in and of itself. What I've seen with more traditional publishing situations is they are truly, in today's day and age, looking for people who have a large following. So if you have a large enough following, it might be worth pursuing a publishing deal. Obviously, too, your book needs to have like an interesting topic. So keep that in mind too. But self-publishing is such an easy path in so many ways. Don't get me wrong, there's definitely complexity to it, but you don't have to sit there and wait for someone's permission to publish your book with self-publishing. And for many who are leveraging a book in tandem with their professional career, this is a great avenue because it's very doable to get your book out into the world. So I'm a big fan of self-publishing. I'm also a big fan of it from the standpoint of if you can afford to hire the people you need to make the cover or do the formatting or to edit, you can hire different people for those things up front and then keep all the royalties for yourself on the back end for the lifetime of the book. Whereas if you work with a publisher or even a hybrid publishing situation, you're going to be splitting the profits for the lifetime of that book or whatever your agreement is, but you're going to be splitting profits that maybe you might get sick of doing down the road.
Yeah. Yeah. It's what it's afforded is just more options. And like I said, it's democratized.
Exactly.
How can people find out more about you and follow you and contact you?
Yeah, I am very active over on LinkedIn. That's one of my favorite places to hang out these days on social media. So just find me, Valerie Morris. And you can also reach me through my website, which is tenterocreative.com.
Excellent. Thanks so much for a very wonderful podcast and keep up the great work.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.